So warm welcome everybody to a talk given today by our very own Magda, who is probably one of the leaders of the Scrum team and has been really helping us build out the Scrum community and equally kind of working on the volunteer app, which is one of our projects that's been pushing the various frontiers of the infrastructure we set up. So without further ado, Magda, who's now conquering modular, will take us through estimating with a real focus on in the context of volunteering as well. Over to you, Magda.
Thank you very much. I am now, as we were just discussing, it's always hard to decide which screen needs to be. Okay, do you see the presentation, guys? I hope everyone can see the presentation. So first of all, welcome everyone and good afternoon. So a little introduction about myself. So I've been volunteering with the STA for almost 2 years now. And I currently am working with an awesome team on the volunteer app. In my spare time or in my day job, I'm a Scrum Master in modular, like Jana just said. I'm a career changer. My whole life before becoming a Scrum Master was in office management. And once I learned about the existence of Agile, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about soon, I have decided that this is where I want to be. This is how I need to change. So here I am now. So estimation, the thing that we're going to be talking about today. So what is estimation? And the Oxford Dictionary defines it as the rough calculation of the value, number, quantity, or extent of something, or a judgment of a character of someone or something. So we're going to be talking today about the rough calculation and particularly about the rough estimation of work items in an Agile environment, in sort of software development industry and in volunteering and the kind of jobs, well, things that we're doing here in STA. So moving on. Did you say Agile? Yes, I did, because Agile is now the way of working of most of the software development companies around the world and definitely here in Scotland. And most of them follow some kind of Agile methodology or a mix of few of them. And I've put here on a slide a couple of them like Scrum and Kanban, Extreme Programming, or Lean Management. What is Agile? Agile is an approach to the project management that kind of centers around like incremental and iterative steps, which means that you're working in small chunks of time, developing small chunks of work. Imagine this like creating a puzzle. You have puzzle pieces which you join together to then complete the whole puzzle, and you're doing this in the periods of time. In a Scrum, it's called a sprint, which you might be familiar with. So what does estimation in Agile environment about? And I think the picture here really kind of summarizes it perfectly. It is a fine art of guessing, but what it really is a process of assessing the level of complexity of the work using different techniques. And that is not the full definition of it, because when you're estimating, there's so much more going into it. You have to decide how much work and this work item is going to take, how complex it is. Is there any risk related to this work item or any kind of uncertainty? Further information you need to get. So that's kind of, taking all of this into account, you then try to assess the value, the story points, which I'm going to be talking about in a second. So very often estimation is part of the refinement event in Scrum. And during that time, the whole team, that is developers, designers, testers, agree, discuss the work items. And if you're working in Jira, that's going to be your Jira ticket. You're going to be discussing this ticket, trying to get the common understanding, and only then deciding, the value of the story point. A very important point to stress here that the Agile estimation is relative, not absolute. But what does it mean? So, absolute estimation is answering the question, like what is the amount of liquid in milliliters in the glass on the left side? And you might think you know, but you might be absolutely wrong. You don't have a scale of the glass. You don't know. Relative estimation, though, is which glass has more liquid, and that's much easier to answer. You're looking at the glass, and you know that the one on the right is probably half of the one that is on the left, and that is much easier to do. It's much easier to decide. So generally, human beings, people are better at relative estimation and kind of seeing things in comparison to other things. So why would you estimate if it is an absolute? If you have a piece of work and you cannot say, well, it's going to take me 5 hours or it's going to take me 3 days. Well, it still helps inform the planning for the coming iteration. So if you're working in Scrum, it is very useful to know that if you have something that is 3 story points, you know roughly how much time you have, the common understanding within your team of how much effort it's going to go into this work. You know how many more tickets of a similar size you can pull into the sprint to be able to deliver the value that you agree at the beginning of the sprint. Some companies, some managers also use it for different metrics, like burn down charts and velocity, which are then used for measuring the team's performance. And it also enables team to decide if the work items are ready for working on them and if they're at the right size. Because if you start looking at something and it tells you, well, I don't know, it's so hard to decide whether it's something really big or super, super big, then maybe it is too big. Maybe it needs to be split into smaller chunks of work, smaller pieces of work. Maybe they just don't have enough detail. Maybe there is so much uncertainty around it that it is not possible to work on it. And this kind of information really just comes to light when you start looking at the tickets with this view of estimating it and making it ready for work during the next sprint. So relative estimation, let's dive into that. So like I said, we're not as humans very good at the absolute estimation, but we're fantastic at the relative estimation. So it will be easier for you to say that working on one piece of work is going to take maybe twice as much time as the other one, but you will not be able to say, oh, it's going to be 2 hours or 3 days. So when the team estimates in the story points, they assign the point values using different techniques, which I will describe soon. So even looking at this picture here, you are able to say that, you know, one rock is roughly twice the size of the other one. So when you're looking at work items, you would say that, you know, 2 story points should be twice as much effort as 1 story point. And again, bearing in mind that this means that, you know, this takes into account not just the amount of like lines of code that you have to write, but maybe the level of complexity and available resources and so on. And that looks from, you know, from the moment of starting development, but also through to testing. So it is also, you know, another example I could give you is think about making a coffee at home. If you're making a Nescafe at home where you just put a spoonful of coffee and swirl some hot water, that may be a 1 point. Getting an Americano in a you know, from a barista, that's maybe a 3 story points. You know, there is a bit more skill that is required for that. But if you're going into the whole latte art coffee, you know, with a little teddy bear sticking out from your mug, that is definitely a much more complicated thing. And that would be a much higher value in terms of the story points. So what are the estimation techniques that we can use to help us gain this better understanding? And there are very many. However, the most common and popular ones, and the ones you've maybe either heard of or have already been using, are the planning poker and the t-shirt sizes. So the planning poker uses Fibonacci sequence numbers, where the team members get the cards either physically, if they are lucky enough to be working together, or online, and they submit their estimates at the same time. The t-shirt sizes use the t-shirt sizes from the extra small to extra large, and again, there is a common understanding of in the team of what does it mean medium or what does it mean small. The other ways to estimate are dot voting, the bucket system, affinity mapping, which are less popular. However, some of you maybe have met them in at work or have had them in from other sources. So t-shirt sizing. It is probably the best way of estimating in the volunteering setting. The reason for it is that it is a technique that gives you a rough estimation. It can be also used when you're estimating a large number of work items when you maybe don't have time to like really dive into the details of every ticket. But in the volunteering setting, we very often see each other maybe once or twice a week. It is hard to do. With t-shirt sizing, you can also utilize the offline communication using Slack, for example, to estimate. And it is just easier. It's easier for people as well to imagine a medium-sized t-shirt or a medium-sized something rather than number 5. Number 5 doesn't really tell you anything. If it is necessary to convert those t-shirt sizes into numbers, as a team, you can agree, you can choose one size, usually medium, since it's kind of bang in the middle. After the discussion and agreement amongst the team members, you agree the point value, which is then assigned, and just like the picture here shows you, size medium can be like 5 or 8 points, and then when assigning the actual number, that's what you would go by. Planning poker, the other popular way of estimating. Again, the same idea is of agreeing the baseline stories. So it is very good to have common understanding of what is like a 1, 5, and say a 13 story point work item. This is something that the team has to agree for themselves, and it's going to be different for every team. And it definitely requires a lot of discussion. It is good to have those work items invisible, so people can always go back and kind of refresh their memories, just in case you don't know what a 5 looks like. So once you're ready to estimate, you will sort of compare the tickets that are coming in to your backlog, to your sprint, to those baselines, and kind of weighing the complexity of the work and the size and the risk against those baselines. And after that, in a sort of purely logistical way of doing things, each team member will estimate the work item according to their own views of this work item using the Fibonacci sequence cards. As I said, you can do it if you're working together. You can actually get the planning poker cards, or you can utilize many online tools that are free to use or are already part of the Atlassian suite of software. And after the discussion, so for the facilitator of the refinement of the estimation session, after explaining what are we going to be working on, what is the ticket, and asking about the estimates, every person will sort of play their card, and they will get revealed at the same time, which means that nobody's going to get influenced by anybody else's opinion. And if there are any outliers, this can be discussed. So it's easy enough if everybody votes 5. That's, we have the common understanding. But if you have a work item and somebody says 3 and somebody says 8, then it is very important to have this discussion, to have this conversation about why this is 3 for you and why this is 8 for this other person. Because maybe there isn't the understanding. Maybe the person who's voting 3 didn't quite understand all the requirements. Maybe there is more work required, or it's more complex. Well, maybe the person who said 8, they know something that nobody else knows. Maybe they can see this from an angle that nobody else was able to see. So it is important to kind of say out loud those things and allow the team
to begin.
Sorry?
And let the fighting begin.
Hopefully not. Yes, this is why you have a facilitator who will just say, come on, guys, it's just a game. But it helps gain the understanding. And that's, again, a very important thing, that to understand that this is just the beginning of conversation. Those numbers are just numbers. It is about reaching the same level of understanding. So when we go to work on those tickets during the sprint, we all have the common understanding and we have the similar expectations. Things to remember, very important, that most of all, like most important thing, you are not estimating in hours or days. This is a very common mistake that many people will commit, and especially people who have not done this before, or maybe it is kind of influenced by the management who really wants to know, when is this piece of work going to get finished? And it is important to always stress that you're not estimating in hours or days. In your head, very privately, you can think, I think number 3 is going to take me 3 hours, but this is not something to share with anybody. And the team will get better at estimating as the time goes on. So at first, when you start estimating, whether it's using planning poker or t-shirt sizes, you might have big differences, and these discussions will have to happen. And the more they happen, the easier it will be understanding the train of thought of every single team member, and it will get quicker and better and kind of more accurate as estimate can be. And again, another thing, you will never know everything. There will be things that will just come up. You know, you start coding and suddenly you realize that this is all wrong. So you will underestimate, but also overestimate the work. And it is just part of the learning process. And it is important to not get, bogged down by the detail of it. It is, again, it's always about having this common understanding and being able to move on. So yes, part of this understanding is asking questions to make sure that you understand the work that is being estimated. So if you may be new to the team and you can see that everyone said it's number 3 and you're saying 8, don't just change to 8, ask questions. This is the fantastic way to learn, fantastic way to know your product that you're working on better, but as well kind of know more about the way the team's working. I think to say as well that in Agile world, you will have many people kind of on both sides of the barricade of estimation. Some people will say this is horrible. It's like, trying to look in the glass ball and just say, well, this is what's going to happen. Some people will say, well, this is the essential part of the refinement. And I think the truth is always lies somewhere in between. It should always be the beginning of discussion. It should always be something that helps us understand what we're working on better. This is why we're not estimating in hours or days. And if you've been working in a team for a long time, you know each other very well, you know the way you're thinking. You might completely skip estimation and only do it ad hoc when you have a brand new piece of work coming that is quite kind of outside your usual scope. Or if you're a brand new team, this is a great way to kind of get to this common understanding. So, it's not a requirement. Nobody in Scrum will tell you you have to do estimation. It's very important. It is a tool, and as any tool, it can be used for your benefits, but be mindful of it as well. And something to say that there are no losers in this poker game, because at the end of the day, hopefully, all we get is like the common understanding, and we know what we're working on. So that is pretty much it. I just have an estimation game, which I would be happy to do with you guys if everybody and some people on the call I know have already played that game, so they maybe have an unfair advantage. But otherwise, feel free to put in the chat your estimations of the size of these animals. And please do think about the complexities of the animals as well. And I don't know, take 5 minutes to do that. And in the meantime, if anybody has any questions, I'm sure I can start answering some questions.
Did you want us to do them all at once, Magda, in the chat?
Oh,
Well, no, let's not do it all at once in case you're going to be like looking at each other. How much would you say is a cow? Okay, I need to open chat here.
And what would be the largest number, just to get a sense of the range from 1 to
21 is going to be the largest number.
the
So
elephant's
normally,
21.
yeah, like in the work environment, you probably would never use higher than 21. Even 21 is quite rare.
Oh, sorry, it's on your slide. Sorry, I should have looked at your slide. It says 21.
Clearly, the elephant would actually be one of the easiest because you're not having to miniaturize any parts.
Yeah.
The mouse is a mammal and also the most intricate part, so that's not so easy.
Mouse, I would say mouse is easy enough.
No, the mouse is you've got a full-on mammal. You got to get those teeny tiny whiskers. Oh no. Building a mouse, that's going to be complicated. But the elephant, at least I can deal with really large parts here. So I'm going to say the elephant is one of the easiest options.
Okay. What would you say about a snake?
Is it though?
Snake has no legs, so don't have to deal with much. It's a single body part with just that's going to be one of the easiest ones.
So it depends on what you want to say by size, because the giraffe is really tall. The giraffe's more tall than an elephant, so maybe that's a 21.
Yeah, and how you actually make it
Thing on the
taste
giraffe that worries me.
Well, what about the picture of the two kangaroos? Is it like two kangaroos or is it just a kangaroo?
Now, that's obviously a task that should have been split into two parts. So I think
How could you split a mom and a baby? But yeah, this is the kind of questions you'd be asking. Like, what about giraffe? Giraffe's not a particularly big animal. If you take out the neck, then it's kind of the size of a cow, probably. But then the neck, does it complicate
The animal's small if you take it out of the neck. What do you mean?
once you've made the cow, you could just extend that class to make the giraffe.
I think, Andy, I want to see you code that cow. Also the dog. So obviously there is a picture of a dog here, but are we talking Chihuahua? Or are we talking Great Dane? This is just a generic Google dog.
The dog comes with extension plugins for the collar as well, so that's going to be complicated.
Also, aren't dolphins very intelligent? So we'd have to think about all the brain power. So that might be quite difficult.
Yeah, true.
That doesn't even look like it's in water as well.
I think it's such a wonderful water that it doesn't.
But render water? Well, we didn't account for that.
What about the deer? I mean, deer has the antlers, but only sometimes, because they shed the antlers at some point. So that is, as you can see, high level of complexity when you're looking at all of this and start really diving into the details. And I know this is like just a fun example of how you would be doing those things, but there are lots of questions you can start asking yourself. Like, I don't know, if you're just looking at the size, snake is not really a very big animal, maybe slightly bigger than the mouse in terms of the height, but in terms of the length, that's definitely kind of the size of a cow or even an elephant. So this is where this whole discussion comes into place to get this common understanding. So when you pick up the ticket, when the time comes, you actually know what to expect. So this is my whole presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing right now. And I can see that there are some questions from Chris here. So I'm going to have a quick read. Do you think the whole team should estimate the ticket or a feature, or do you think it should be one estimate for the dev and one for test?
Yeah, Magda, the reason for that is on an interview last night, the CTO asked me the exact same question, and she found that in different industry or different places she had worked, it was very there was common practices of the whole team doing it, and then different disciplines doing it. So it'll be interesting to hear what everybody's thoughts were.
Well, I'm going to maybe open this to everybody else first, and then I'll tell you what would be my preferred way of working. So what do you guys think?
I actually worked at a company down south at one point that they did have very distinctive, everyone would do the main estimate, but the test team, they had dedicated testers on this team. So they did do a second estimate. So we do have on it something like, this is the estimate for creating the task, and another one for the test team. But that was only because we had dedicated testers. Most companies I've worked for, the folk who are doing the testing are quite often the same people as doing the development. So they may well include it all in one estimate.
Okay. Anybody else?
The only team I've worked in when we did estimation, everyone did it. And I was the only really junior developer, and I always hated doing it because we did the poker thing, and every time we'd hold up a card, mine would be much higher than everyone else's.
But that is actually a very common thing, because everybody will have a different level of experience and a skill level, and I think it is good to hear all of the voices, because I think everybody on the team has to be kind of mindful of where we all are, and again, as long as we started treated as the beginning of the conversation rather than, but Joe, you said it's going to be a 3. Why is it not a 3? Why is it taking so much time? Then that is the very wrong direction. Anybody else wants to answer that question?
I would also point out that when you're new on a team, your estimates are always going to be way off, because every single team has a very different idea of what a 5 is. So you got to join one team, and 5 is actually a very small task. You go on another team, and everyone's just like, "Ooh, 5! Why do you think it's so large?" It's very frustrating. But also, whenever a new team starts, you're all now having to guess, what do we call a 5 in this particular project? So yeah, you often find in those, as even at the start, those first few weeks, so you go through one sprint and it's just like 5 meant something quite small before, but now after a few sprints have gone through, you've all got a better understanding of each other on the team. But yes, the moment you join a new team, it's just like, oh no, here we go again.
Well, you never stop learning, don't you? So in the team that I work with, we're also include the whole team. So both the QA engineers as well as the developers, and we're also using planning poker. So everybody gets to vote, and like the whole process from coding up to the testing is considered. So the whole journey of the ticket is considered. So Chris, you had another question. How do you handle stakeholders who could use estimate as a weapon for delivery? This is a very difficult question.
Well, I've had that.
I want to hear from somebody who hasn't had that.
This is going to be a very quiet meeting, Joanna. This is why I kind of highlighted this, that it is extremely important for the team to realize and share the message to the people higher up, the managers, even the line managers, that this is not estimated in hours or days. Like this is it is relative, because you want to know relatively how much more effort you would need to put into this piece of work, or how much more risk it carries than this other piece of work that we've maybe done 2 years ago, but it's still our baseline for us because we really understand it. And I think it is always going to be the battle between people who want to know when you're going to finish something, when is are you going to reach the deadline, and the sort of agile way of working when where we try to be more adaptable and more flexible. And yes, I think, how do you handle it? Patiently, with a lot of conversation and a lot of yes, politeness.
I think
Anybody else wants to add to that, Andy?
I think a lot of the time it's this idea of you don't necessarily need to be sharing your internal task estimates with the client as well. But yeah, it's helpful to share some form of estimate. They don't necessarily need to know the individual estimates that we've given or the individual tasks, and that can be represented to another in a different way, which is, I guess, my way of saying that's the product owner's problem, not mine.
Yeah. Anybody else had an experience like that, or thoughts on the process, or any other questions as well, actually?
Chris, one of the things I'd say sorry, Joe, but when often things are weaponized, it's a sign of a bad relationship, and actually the problem isn't estimating, it's elsewhere. And then part of that is culture, building relationships. If you've had a team that's not delivered and overpromised, it's a whole exercise in managing stakeholders to convert their way of thinking. And I do think actually that's where Agile helps a little bit with I mean, that used to be terrible when you waited 6 months to see anything. Whereas if you're kind of taking people on the journey and not making decisions for them, and you're going back and putting the decisions back in the business, it helps build that cadence of momentum. And also, if you're working with an area of the business that isn't used to technology, they don't know how long things take. It's amazing how many people make assumptions about tech. Isn't it just is like the bane of my life. And bringing people on that learning journey of complexity is quite important as well. But it's hard work. It really is hard work. But yeah, you were going to say, Joe? I don't want to.
No, that's okay. I just had another question. If that's okay. So I was wondering about the case where you might have a ticket which how different devs would think about the size of that ticket might be different depending on how much prior knowledge you have. So not to bore everyone who's not on the Volunteer Up project, but for example, some of the native-based tickets we're now working on, if you've done some native-based stuff, it's fairly easy because you've got that knowledge. If you don't, you've got to kind of learn it from scratch. And so it's like, so I guess it's like one ticket might look quite different to different people in the team. So I just wonder if you have any tips about how do you estimate that, because it might, different developers' experience of taking on that ticket might be quite different.
So what I would say, again, it is about asking those questions. So if you would kind of point it quite low, because you know that it's not going to take a lot of effort from you to do that. And somebody else as well, no, because I have no idea how to do this. I think it is about having this conversation, but also, at the end of the day, you have to agree something, like if you're doing an estimation, you have to do something. If it is possible to leave this work item until the person who doesn't know much about native base in this case, until they can kind of learn more and have a better informed decision. There is also an option definitely in planning poker where you can just say, I don't know. If you don't know, you don't know, and it's okay to say that you don't know. So that is an option. If you, however, categorically need to say something, then it is like for the individuals or the team to agree on a number, but with a proviso that this is just a number. It's just been, when Joanna has advertised this talk, Doogie, who has just left, he put a GIF of somebody putting a finger in the air, because this is exactly how it is. It is just a guessing game. So you just put a number to have the number, to be done with it, but with the view that nobody's going to come to this person, and say, well, why didn't you do it?
Cool, that's really helpful. It makes me think about when was it Paul was always talking about user experience stuff. He was like, it's the conversations you have in the team that are more important than the things you write down
it is very true that because it's only like you will get better. And as I said, very often teams will stop estimation, especially if they're working together for a long time. They have a similar level of knowledge. There is no need to be doing this. Like in that case, if you continue estimating, which by all means do that, but more often than not, this is the kind of situation where you invite those difficult conversations with the managers, like, oh, why is your velocity going down? Or why is this happening? Well, if you're not doing this, you're still delivering, you're working well, you have those conversations, but you know, like nobody, like you're not making a whip for yourself. Any other questions, anybody?
I think the only thing I would add as well is I think estimating is a really good way of becoming self-aware of how long you're taking to code things. And it is a way that if you actually probably use it more for yourself as well, of right, it took me X amount of time last time to do this. Oh, wow, I've done it quicker. You know, it kind of is a little bit more, you know, when you first start, most people aren't really good at asking all the questions they need to. So then the next time you do something, you're a bit more aware of, oh, I do need to know about connected components and I do need to talk to my friend here. So it can kind of be another tool to nudge people into thinking about the work they're about to do as well, rather than just the management.
And I think what Andy said as well is actually very important and interesting, that if you've been working with a team for a while and you have the common understanding of the baseline tickets, it's awesome, but then you go somewhere else, it's all gone. But the same, you might be still working with the same team, but suddenly you're working on a different product. And now this changes. So you've always been on the back end, but now, since you're a full stack, now you're working on the front end. Like, I have no idea what happened now. So you kind of have to review those baseline tickets and kind of think, okay, well, this is now going to be our baseline ticket, and you kind of review it, you know, plus you will have people coming and going. This knowledge kind of has to be refreshed at kind of at all times. It's like nothing is just set, you know, as somebody smart said, that change is the only constant. You have to keep reviewing those things. I don't like the silence, guys.
It was a great talk, Magda, really.
I really hope that people will find it useful for their STA projects. Definitely, I would recommend looking at the t-shirt sizes for the volunteering projects, because it is just easier to kind of, especially because we don't work as much together as we do in a normal work setting. But also, it is easier if you have a large ticket. Maybe we don't want large tickets. Maybe we just want medium and small. And this kind of invites this conversation to kind of make things a bit smaller. Thank you, guys. Okay.
Yeah, I thought the t-shirt sounded really good. I hadn't heard of that before. I really like the sound of that.
I've actually been on a team that they started with t-shirt sizes. So the backlog, they would do a backlog grooming. Always hated that term. Where they did t-shirt sizes of just the whole lot. But then at the sprint planning, those t-shirt sizes would then, they'd be bringing in these tasks. So the product owner would have a general idea of this is a large task or a small task or whatever. And then the dev team would then do their own planning based on that. So the idea would be that they would then use Scrum Poker, the Fibonacci numbers instead. So they'd end up resizing them, but not necessarily changing them from small or medium or large or anything like that. But it was kind of helpful because it allowed people to do a rough estimate of this is what the sprint will look like. And then when it got to it, they did a more in-depth one for the actual dev team. But it meant that the dev team wasn't having to be asked to constantly do a full Scrum Poker on all the backlog every time that was being gone through.
Definitely. Okay. Any more questions, anybody? I also wanted to say, if anybody after this has any questions, like if you haven't done this before and you maybe don't want to raise your hand right now, feel free to like reach out to me. If also somebody would like to have access to this presentation, I can make this available for you guys as well, especially if you'd like to maybe do it with your teams and maybe people cannot attend this or cannot watch this, then I'm more than happy to share that. And yeah, otherwise, any questions, please either contact me, speak to your Scrum Masters, who will also know how to do that. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your lovely comments. I can just see them appear. They make me blush.
Go Magda. Yay. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. Hope you're well. Hope you're ready for the weekend. I know I am.
Right.
Okay.
Excellent. Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks a
guys.
lot,
Bye,
Magda.
guys.
That was really
Nice
good.
to meet you, Andy.
You too. Bye.
Keep chatting away.
Right.